When it comes to the armored vehicles of the Third Reich, everyone immediately remembers the unbeatable Tiger or the fearsome Panther. But the truth is that the most effective tank killer of the Second World War did not even have a turret, and strictly speaking, was not a tank at all. By the beginning of 1944, this unremarkable machine had destroyed a fantastic 20,000 enemy armored vehicles, more than all the heavily promoted Tigers and Panthers combined. At the same time, it cost 3 times less than a heavy tank and could be assembled much faster. Meet the Sturmgeschütz III, or simply the StuG. A low steel box born out of total shortage, a machine that German generals did not even want to put into production at first. How did this cheap compromise with its stubby short gun turn into the worst nightmare of the supposedly invulnerable Soviet T-34? And why did Red Army soldiers value captured German predators so highly that they climbed into them right on the battlefield without hesitation? To answer these questions, we need to turn back time to the era when Germany's armored forces were only beginning to take shape. The year was 1935. The German army was actively preparing for a new Great War. But military theorists in the General Staff understood one frightening fact. Their infantry was still completely defenseless against fortified enemy positions. Imagine the battlefield of that time. Soldiers advance against enemy bunkers and hidden machine gun nests. Tanks on which so many hopes had been placed race ahead at full speed and disappear beyond the front line. They launch deep raids, leaving ordinary infantrymen alone against machine guns and concrete strongholds. Field artillery was too slow and too difficult to drag across shell-cratered ground under crossfire. This meant that attacking troops would inevitably be drowned in blood trying to break through a prepared defense. It was then that an ambitious colonel, Erich von Manstein, came up with a plan that would forever change the face of German armored warfare. He wrote a proposal suggesting the creation of a fundamentally new combat vehicle. It would not be a classic tank with a rotating turret, but an armored bodyguard for the infantry. An assault gun on tracks capable of moving shoulder to shoulder with soldiers, a machine with a low silhouette that would shield infantry with its armor and smash any enemy bunker with direct fire from a few hundred meters away. Manstein's idea sounded simple, elegant, and incredibly effective. The assault artillery project received full approval in military circles, and although tank generals demanded more conventional tanks for their divisions, the concept of an armored bodyguard was too good to gather dust in archives. The blueprints landed on the desks of engineers at Daimler-Benz. They had to turn this ambitious concept into steel, but they had to do so under conditions of extreme shortage of time and industrial capacity. German industry could not afford the luxury of designing a completely new tracked chassis from scratch. The engineers chose the most practical path. They took the chassis of the newest medium tank, the Panzer III. With one stroke, they cut away its large rotating turret and completely changed the concept of the vehicle. By 1937, the first 5 experimental machines of the so-called Zero series rolled out of the factory gates. They looked highly unusual. Instead of a turret, the hull carried a low fixed casement with the barrel of a 75mm gun protruding menacingly from it. Strictly speaking, these first prototypes weren't even real combat vehicles. To save time and simplify production, they were made of ordinary non-armored steel. A real shell would have pierced them like cardboard, but they were never meant to face enemy fire. Their main task was to prove to skeptical officers in the General Staff that Manstein's idea really worked.
And on the training grounds, the new machine caused a sensation. Infantry commanders, used to halting attacks again and again because of machine gun nests, suddenly saw the perfect support weapon. Where a classic tank with a tall turret towered above the battlefield and immediately attracted enemy anti-tank fire, the turretless assault gun practically hugged the ground. Its height was less than 2 meters. The low vehicle could hide behind a small hill, dense bushes, or the remains of a ruined wall, remaining almost invisible to the enemy. Exercise scenarios repeatedly demonstrated astonishing effectiveness. Infantry pinned down by fire from a concrete bunker no longer had to wait for horse-drawn heavy artillery. Instead, the commander simply gave a signal. Out from the folds of the terrain crawled a low steel silhouette. The machine moved to within 500 meters, turned its entire hull, aimed its 75mm gun, and with one accurate high-explosive shell blasted the bunker embrasure apart. The path was open. A problem that would once have cost hundreds of lives was now solved in minutes. Rejecting the rotating turret gave engineers a major tactical advantage. It allowed them to mount a powerful heavy gun on a relatively light tank chassis, something an ordinary tank of that size could not handle. The turret ring would have broken, or the suspension would have collapsed. In addition, the machine became lighter, faster, and cheaper to build. The military was delighted. In October 1938, the Weapons Office signed an order for 280 full combat vehicles. The concept of the assault gun had proven its crushing effectiveness. Now engineers faced a new challenge: how to turn this steel box into an armored fortress and fit 4 crewmen inside without them getting in each other's way. They again used the Panzer III chassis as a basis. The hull was divided into 3 classic sections. In the front sat the transmission and steering mechanisms, protected by sloped armor plates. In the rear was the engine. In the center rose the angular, low-profile, fixed casement. The frontal armor of this casement reached 50 millimeters. By the standards of the early Second World War, that was an extremely serious level of protection. Most anti-tank guns of the era simply could not penetrate 5 centimeters of Krupp steel, especially when sloped. The crew could roll directly onto enemy positions, knowing the front armor would withstand hits. But every advantage came at a price. To keep the vehicle from becoming too heavy and sluggish, the sides and rear were reduced to just 30 millimeters. It was a deliberate compromise because the assault gun was designed to face the enemy head-on and advance with infantry. Abandoning the turret also brought another enormous benefit: simplicity of production. The machine no longer required an expensive turret ring, electric motors, or scarce bearings. It was enough to weld armor plates together and securely mount the gun. Production cost the Treasury far less than a conventional tank, and factories could build them much faster. The greatest challenge, however, was internal ergonomics. By removing the turret, engineers locked 4 men into one cramped steel compartment surrounded by 44 shells and rattling mechanisms: commander, driver, gunner, and loader. Every centimeter of workspace had to be measured with German precision. The driver sat in the front left. Directly behind him was the gunner. Behind the gunner sat the commander, while the loader occupied the rear right side of the casement. Conditions inside were extremely cramped. Visibility was poor, and the crew did not even have proper firing ports for personal weapons, only an MP-38 submachine gun for close defense. Yet this tight arrangement created perfect coordination. The commander practically breathed down the gunner's neck, and orders were passed instantly without any intercom system. Now the men were in place, the armor was welded, the engine installed. Only one thing remained: to give this steel predator its teeth.
The main weapon of the vehicle was the 75mm StuG 37 gun, with an extremely short barrel, only 24 calibers long. At first glance, such a weapon seemed unimpressive. It lacked high muzzle velocity and looked more like a stubby pipe sticking out of the front armor. But for an assault gun, it was ideal. The vehicle's original task was to destroy fortifications, not duel enemy tanks. The short barrel did not catch on trees, did not hinder movement in narrow city streets, and did not unbalance the machine by adding too much weight to the front. It fired a heavy 5.7 kilogram high explosive shell at a modest speed of 420 meters per second. Yet despite this, the gun demonstrated almost surgical accuracy.
At distances up to 500 meters, the chance of hitting the target was practically 100%. A gunner could place shell after shell directly into bunker embrasures. There was also an armor-piercing shell in the ammunition load. At 500 meters, it could penetrate 39 millimeters of steel angled at 30 degrees, more than enough to turn any light tank of the era into scrap metal. The only serious drawback was the gun's limited traverse. It could move only 12 degrees left or right. If the target lay outside that narrow arc, the driver had to pull the steering levers and rotate the entire 20-ton vehicle. Powering this machine was a reliable 12-cylinder gasoline engine producing around 300 horsepower. It was a proven power plant already used in medium tanks. To help the 20-ton assault gun handle muddy European fields, engineers widened the tracks and fitted the road wheels with rubber rims to extend suspension life. The result was a mobile, responsive, and dependable vehicle. In May 1940, the StuG-3 received its baptism of fire in France, but only on a microscopic scale. The Wehrmacht had just 24 machines on the entire Western Front. They had to be spread thinly in tiny platoons along the line of advance. Yet Manstein's idea worked perfectly. Infantrymen practically prayed for the arrival of the low steel boxes that confidently opened the way and crushed French bunkers with 75mm high-explosive shells. The statistics spoke for themselves. During the entire campaign, only one vehicle was lost at the spearhead of the attack, and even that one was quickly repaired and returned to service. Impressed commanders immediately demanded increased production, and tiny platoons soon grew into full battalions. However, this triumph concealed a deadly trap. Easy victories in the West convinced German designers that 50mm of frontal armor and a short-barreled gun were sufficient for any task. With this dangerous illusion, the assault guns were sent east into the vast lands of the Soviet Union, for which they were completely unprepared. By the start of Operation Barbarossa, the Wehrmacht had 250 assault guns distributed across all key sectors. The main striking force was the new Ausf B version. It featured improved running gear, wider tracks, and a more reliable 6-speed gearbox. But the essentials remained unchanged: the same 50mm frontal armor and the same short-barreled 75mm gun. At first, German expectations of another blitzkrieg seemed justified. StuG-3s confidently destroyed old Soviet bunkers and easily pierced the thin armor of light BT-7 and T-26 tanks. But the euphoria of rapid victories soon turned into real shock. German intelligence completely missed the appearance of a new generation of Soviet tanks. The encounter with the T-34 and heavy KV-1 became a disaster. The short-barreled gun, which had seemed universal in France, became nearly useless against these new machines. Shells merely struck sparks and ricocheted away. Autumn tests in 1941 confirmed the worst fears. The frontal armor of the T-34 was practically invulnerable to standard German armor-piercing rounds. At the same time, the much-praised 50mm armor of the German assault guns was easily penetrated by Soviet 76mm guns from medium range.
It seemed that the career of the low assault gun in mobile warfare was over. The machine appeared powerless. And at this critical moment, everything depended entirely on the crews, the German soldiers who had to find a way to survive and turn their weaknesses into a deadly weapon against Stalin's supposedly invincible steel monsters. Facing Soviet tanks they could not defeat in frontal combat, the StuG crews understood that direct duels now meant suicide. If their short 75mm gun could not penetrate the armor of a T-34 with armor-piercing rounds, then the very nature of combat had to change, and they changed it, transforming the vehicle's weakness into a lethal ambush tactic. The StuG-3 still had one great advantage: its silhouette. The vehicle was not even 2 meters tall.
Where a Soviet tank needed a full ravine to hide its turret, the German assault gun needed only roadside bushes, a small fence, or a pile of rubble. Crews began to exploit this advantage systematically. They camouflaged their vehicles so well that the hidden assault guns, nicknamed Artstorm by Soviet troops, were nearly impossible to detect before the first shot. The Germans also stopped relying on armor-piercing rounds. Instead, they turned to heavy high-explosive shells weighing 5.7 kilograms. The logic was brutal and practical. If you cannot pierce the steel box, destroy what is inside it, or cripple its mobility. When a T-34 carelessly exposed its side to an ambush, the StuG crew fired a high-explosive shell. The blast might not penetrate the armor completely, but the impact could tear off tracks, shatter road wheels, rip open hatches, and destroy optics. Inside the Soviet tank, fragments of armor could break loose and ricochet around the fighting compartment like bullets, wounding or killing the crew. The tank became a blind, immobilized target. A classic example of this tactic came on October 2, 1941. Two Soviet T-34s rolled onto German positions. The commander of one StuG-3 made a daring decision. He ordered his damaged vehicle to retreat slowly, pretending to be easy prey. The Soviet tankers, blinded by the excitement of pursuit, charged after it and forgot about their flanks. They drove straight into a prepared kill zone where hidden StuGs were waiting. A short burst of crossfire at close range, and both Soviet tanks were burning wrecks. This tactic of exhausting ambushes and shooting at tracks allowed German crews to survive and sometimes even defeat superior opponents. But it was only a temporary solution, a desperate attempt to patch a hole in doctrine. The war on the Eastern Front showed with merciless clarity that the short barrel was hopelessly outdated. To remain a predator rather than a prey, the StuG-3 needed to evolve radically. It had to grow real fangs. In autumn 1941, after reading reports about the invulnerability of Soviet tanks, Hitler ordered the immediate strengthening of all German armored vehicles. Designers who had previously made only minor changes to the StuG-3, simplifying the casement shape in version C, or adding radios in command vehicles of version E, were suddenly forced into frantic redesign. The short-barreled machine had to be saved, or the Eastern Front would grind it to dust. The breakthrough came in spring 1942 with the arrival of the Ausf F model. The short, stubby gun disappeared forever from the low casement, replaced by a long, predatory 75mm cannon. Its barrel, nearly 3.5 meters long, accelerated armor-piercing shells to 740 meters per second. At that speed, the frontal armor of Soviet T-34s and heavy KVs was no longer an impossible obstacle.
Along with the new gun came stronger protection. The original 50mm frontal armor was no longer enough against Soviet guns, so engineers increased it to an impressive 80mm by welding additional 30mm plates onto the front. Now the German vehicle could confidently destroy enemy tanks from a distance of 1 kilometer while remaining almost immune to return fire from Soviet 76mm guns. The StuG-3 had finally ceased to be merely a quiet bodyguard for infantry. It had mutated into one of the most dangerous tank destroyers of the Second World War. The peak of this forced evolution was the Ausf model, the most numerous and most refined version of the vehicle, which entered production in December 1942. Engineers enlarged the fighting compartment, giving the crew more living space. But the most important improvement was the installation of a proper commander's cupola on the roof with 8 periscopes. The commander was finally freed from claustrophobic tunnel vision and gained an excellent all-around view of the battlefield. The gun was upgraded again to an even more advanced version with a barrel length of 48 calibers. This weapon could penetrate enemy armor at ranges up to 1,200 meters. To protect the thin 30mm side armor from Soviet anti-tank rifles, which could pierce it like paper, the Germans began fitting the vehicle in April 1943 with the now famous side skirts. These 5mm steel plates caused incoming rounds to ricochet or break apart before they could reach the main armor. From a lightly armed, half-blind infantry support vehicle of 1940, the StuG III had transformed into a deadly, heavily armored instrument of destruction. This evolution allowed the assault gun not only to survive on the Eastern Front, but to remain on production lines until the final days of the Third Reich. By the end of the war, the concept, originally born out of a shortage of conventional tanks, had become one of Germany's greatest industrial successes. While Nazi propaganda praised giant machines like the Tiger and Panther, it was this low-profile assault gun that carried the real burden of frontline combat. The Alcat and MIAG factories worked to exhaustion, and in the end, the StuG III became the most numerous tracked armored vehicle in the history of the German armed forces. More than 9,200 examples of various versions rolled off the assembly lines. Nearly every medium tank produced by Germany had one StuG III counterpart beside it. The effectiveness of these vehicles was extraordinary. According to internal German reports, by the beginning of 1944, the crews of assault guns had accounted for around 20,000 destroyed enemy tanks. This figure surpassed the combined achievements of all the celebrated Tigers and Panthers. More terrifying than a Tiger and 3 times cheaper than a heavy tank, the StuG III proved to be the ideal weapon of total war. Even old and battered early production vehicles, such as the Ausf A and B, were not scrapped. Once replaced on the front lines by more modern long-barreled versions, these veterans of the Eastern Front and French campaign were sent to the rear, where they spent their final years in training battalions. At least one Ausf B was still being used in a training school in Denmark as late as 1944. But the most sincere and objective verdict on the vehicle came from the Reich's main enemies, the Soviet soldiers themselves. Captured German assault guns were highly valued in the Red Army. Soviet troops even gave them the respectful nickname Art Sturm. Captured vehicles were eagerly put back into service. In one known case, a Soviet crew that had lost its own tank climbed into a captured StuG III and on the very same day destroyed 2 enemy tanks and 3 vehicles. This perfectly balanced machine fought on both sides of the front until May 1945, proving that sometimes to create a legendary weapon, all you need to do is cut off the unnecessary turret.